Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology, and this is episode 54. Today's date is Sunday, November 15th. So what are we going to look at today? Because of what's going on in the world, even though we've looked at the U.S. chart quite a bit this year, we're going to look at it one more time and also briefly look at Trump's chart. I'll make a comment about what I felt was a distinct slam down by the powers that be in gold earlier this week. And I'll give you a link that deals with the history of gold and just the importance that it has in the financial community. And then we'll get on to our market updates. Again, I have a website, astroindicator.com, which you can get my forecast, the astrology key dates that are, upcoming. I also have a site dealing with my psychology background, personaltruthskills.com, and I do give astrology consultations. You can connect with me at both of those sites. Okay, here's the U.S. chart. Again, it is in the middle. This is the date that I use up here. We have the transits in this outer ring called a bihwheel. And what is going on has been, we're in the middle of some very difficult transits in the U.S. And all you have to do is turn on the news and, that's confirmed. So with astrology, what's helpful is that you get a little bit better idea of what exactly is going on, the characteristics, the quality of the changes, and so forth, how long they will last, and the potential downside and upside that we may be facing here. So, as I've said in the past, we're going through a very important Pluto to Mercury transit. And here we have Pluto right down here, the transit of Pluto at 22 degrees Capricorn, and it is opposite the natal Mercury in our chart. Mercury deals with the media, education, communication, interaction, business, things of that nature. Pluto is largely a destructive force. It has the potential to create something new at the end of its transit, kind of a death and rebirth, a purging, and so forth. But that always remains to be seen as to what extent a real healing can take place. But on the downside, Pluto, in this context, dealing with Mercury, in my estimation, my opinion, deals with a lot to do with manipulation of the media, propaganda, the darker forces trying to take control. Okay. Well, what else is going on in this chart? Well, we also have, by transit, we have Mars right here, is in the sky, just went direct this past Friday. It's now moving forward, but it is essentially squaring our sun. It is also opposite Saturn, so it's creating a T-square. We have a crisis of our identity on a broader scale. I mean, most people are looking at this at the election and what went on and trying to figure that out. And if you listen to the news, nothing shady went on. If you listen to alternative news, then I think you're getting a little bit more clearer picture. But we do have a crisis about our country's identity, its future, its direction, and it's very, it's at a very critical point right now. So this is pretty bleak, if you're getting my drift here, what's happening. The one, spot that we can place a little bit of hope on is that we have the transit of Jupiter is now moving forward. It had been in retrograde, it had been at a point at a lesser degree in Capricorn to Pluto, and now it's past Pluto, it's moving forward, it's going to be exact its own opposition to Mercury here. And, Jupiter is not always a beneficial energy, but primarily it is. It deals with benevolence and wisdom and generosity and positivity, justice, okay? Those are all the potentials of Jupiter. And now that it's moved ahead and it is soon going to be aspecting Mercury, some I don't want to say remedial, but some potential, positive changes are in the wind when it comes to the media and the dark energy that has been pervading our country. So, we do have a potential to kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel here, because what's going on in this chart is now these planets, Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, they are all moving forward. We are going to see some changes come about. Now, the downside here, and I could go on and on, I can't spend too much time on this. The downside here is that Pluto moves very slowly, okay? It is still going to be in this opposition to Mercury a year from now. However, things do evolve, and the upside of Pluto potentially is that it can bring to light these corrupt forces in the world, and those forces can be purged, okay? A healing can then start to result, a renewal can then happen, but it's not a guarantee. People have to recognize what's going on, and they have to take some action, and it's up to, I think, each individual to do what they can to educate themselves, to share things with others, even though that can be dangerous, and to make the changes that need to be made, okay? But astrologically, that possibility exists. Finally, we still have an aspect here of Uranus aspecting the ascendant. This is the revolutionary, in the extremes that we see in the country. Also the focus on the higher tech giants, tied in with the Pluto energy. The higher tech companies, I think, wrestling for greater control over our society. So technology deals with Uranus. So that is still continuing, and it's the one element that has not gone direct yet. So I could go on and on. I mean, we also have, on a very short-term basis, we have Saturn conjunct Pluto in this chart. Again, the negativity is at its extreme. But all I can say on the positive side is that for the most part, we have many of these transits now moving forward, and they are evolving. And if they don't, there's no guarantee of destruction, but we are looking at a complete, if we don't turn things around, we don't call out what's going on in the propaganda, we don't call out these larger global forces that I think are really trying to destroy our country and do something about it, that's what we may end up with. So let's look at what's going on with Trump's chart. Again, the main theme I want to say here is that things are starting to move forward very slowly. Trump has this Pluto-Jupiter aspect affecting his chart as well. Here it is down here, Pluto-Jupiter, okay? And it is in conjunct 150 degrees away from his sun. But as you can see, now Jupiter has started to kick in my estimation, because it has moved past Pluto. And some of that positive, benevolent energy of Jupiter is now more accessible in his life, okay? In addition, we see Saturn has been opposite his Venus. Here is Saturn, and it has been opposite his Venus. But just within the last, week, it too has moved past being exact and now is diminishing, is waning in its, constrictive and depressive, energy. In addition, Saturn had been in conjunct his Mars, and it too is now just very recently has passed and will be lightening up and not affecting him in such a negative fashion. On top of that, he has a very strong Mars. His Mars in his chart is conjunct his ascendant. Okay, he's a forceful, sort of, he's a, sort of a warrior character in some respects. Well, Mars is now moving forward. He has more access to his assertive, courageous side of himself than he had when Mars was retrograde. That's sort of true for everybody, but when you have Mars very prominent in your chart, then you're going to notice it more. Okay? So I just wanted to point those things out, that there is some positive developments going on in Trump's chart. I could go on to Biden. I mean, the thing is, the difference between Trump and Biden and Kamala Harris is that they are their challenges are coming up in the short term, kind of psychologically, as reflected by astrology. Whereas Trump's challenges are very slightly, diminishing. And that may not make any sense in the world given the election or whatever. But I see that in the chart, is that somehow, Trump's gaining traction in whatever, obviously it's the election, but if he was just an individual, that individual is starting to gain traction to move towards, their goals more effectively. Whereas Biden, I won't get into his chart. Look at my last video. He's got Saturn squaring his moon, and it's approaching, it's applying, it's getting worse. And Kamala Harris has a similar sort of dynamic going on if you go back and look at my Kamala Harris videos. So I can't absolutely say how this is going to play out, but I wanted just to make these points. Okay, let's move on. So I want to make a comment about gold, because gold and silver have had very astrology that should be quite bullish now and for the next couple months. But we had a day where gold lost $100 in one day, and it made no sense at all to me. Because the fundamentals of gold are very good. Here's just an example of this. Russia and their National Wealth Fund. If you look, down here, this is a fairly large fund, and now they're starting to invest in gold. Okay, the fundamentals, financial fundamentals, where we look at the supply and the demand and the increasing attractiveness to gold by these large sovereign funds and so forth, are very, very supportive for gold. So what went on earlier this week where gold went down $100? Well, I don't have the link here, but I found this. You can go to GATA.org. And this is the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. You can see it written right here. It's been around for 20 years. And it is essentially a two-man organization which have been fighting to stop the manipulation in gold for 20 years. And just if you look at the history, and this is what this is actually a presentation that Chris Powell made in several places just recently. At the New Orleans Investment Conference, the Mining Investment Asia Conference, Mining Investment North American Conference. And you can go to this link. You can find it at GATA.org, and the slides are there. I found this article at goldseek.com. But it goes through the history, and it's very fascinating because they downplay, generally speaking, gold is downplayed as to how important it is globally in the financial system. Because you can't really, so many things, the price of so many things, other currencies, bonds and so forth, essentially are priced off of gold. And so if central banks, big bullion banks and so forth can keep a lid on the price of gold, then they have more control over the price of other things. And it's control that they're after, okay? But the weak link in their attempts to manipulate gold is always going to be the most, fundamental thing, which is the supply and demand. So anyway, I found this very fascinating and gives you a history of what's going on. And it also actually kind of gives you some sense that they don't have absolute control. Every now and then they can smash things down, which we'll look at in a minute on the gold chart, but they don't have absolute control because there's too many major countries and sovereign wealth funds that we just looked at that see gold as an ultimate store of value. Because most of our currencies, they're backed by nothing. They're just paper. Gold, you own it. There's no counterparty. You're not trying to get your money back from your broker or anything like that. I could go on and on. There's a downside to gold. You have to store it. You have to put it someplace. But investing in gold has some real advantages. Okay, let's look at some charts here. Well, this did sort of surprise me. This energy right here where you see my cursor, these astrological dates that I'd forecast, they had connotations of more uncertainty and fear. They were Saturn-related chart energy related to the Dow. And since we were breaking down through support right at this level, I could, it just simply seemed conceivable that this breakdown, this drop, could have continued. But this was right when the election was essentially happening. And it looked like Biden had won, and Biden is in essence, sort of promising more, more stimulus, more money printing if he becomes president. And so that is always bullish for the major indexes. More money would be available, to invest in stocks and so forth. But this market is very, very high relative to what's going on to, our debt and what's going on, the unemployment. There's no real reason why the stock market should be this high other than stimulus coming from the central banks. And so I interpret this as called FOMO, fear of missing out. And so when it looked like Biden was going to win, people jumped back into stocks big time, and now we're bumping back up against a resistance area. We do have some astro dates coming up, one tomorrow, and some later on. The next one would be December 3rd. I'll just briefly say I think this December 3rd date is the more important date. I'd be a little bit surprised if we break higher just early this next week. We don't have what I look at as trigger astrology dates in conjunction with this key date that's happening tomorrow. This date, December 3rd, often is a reversal energy time period that I have seen repeatedly. So if the market is still bumping around up here, mark your calendar for December 3rd because we could have a reversal on that date. So let's look at gold. This was the smash down, and let's just look at when it occurred. Now it was a day that the stock market went very high. Ostensibly because of a vaccine that was going to come out, and I'm not really sure how accurate that was. But let's just look at this market in isolation. Here we have a long trend line, that green line. We had a triangle formation that this market was bouncing back and forth in, and then it broke out. On an astro date going back to November 4th. And it went above the 50-day moving average. And suddenly it was in green light territory. It was definitely going to be going higher. The market was not overbought. We had some astrology coming up and then smash-o on, I forget what day it was, maybe the 6th or something. No, let's see, it was Just it was this past Monday, a week ago. And so this is 7th. So anyway, down 100 points. And if you look at the intermarket trading, 15-minute charts and smaller, there was no buying going on. This was continued selling by some outside force. And, can it continue? Well, there are other people who all of a sudden see that this is a buying opportunity. And it's, I think, just an attempt to, in a way, it's a threat. It's financial terrorism in some regard, to smash it down, buy it when it's low, shake out all the small traders, freak people out, and now we're edging higher again. But this can happen. This can happen, because gold is such a key, important element to these, the most powerful financial entities in the world. They want to keep control of it. But we do have some strong things happening coming up in gold. And, you need to be a trader. You need to know how to place your stops, protect yourself. But coming up, particularly when we get into, November 22nd, if we're still kind of hanging out down here, we have kind of a similar reversal energy that I spoke about with the Dow occurring in the gold market when we get to November 22nd. Now, the 22nd is a Sunday, but that would still apply to the futures market. And so it could go into Sunday, Monday, and we may indeed notice that. We also have bullish things happening in early December out here, like December 4th and 5th. So watch these dates. If you want to go back to my website, astroindicator.com, you'll see the same chart and the dates listed. But we have bullish astro dates coming up. We'll see if you want to combine these. I forgot to tell you this, but all these vertical lines deal with the astrology. But you want to combine your methods. You want to combine the fundamental analysis, technical, and astrological. And the astrological is supportive. If we get back over that 50-day moving average, and particularly if we get back over this green line, we are going higher. Briefly, I also wanted to point out, this is the GDXJ. This is the Gold Mining Junior Fund ETF. When you see a market trending down like this in a tight channel for a long, long time, you want to watch it. Because if it breaks out, and we had one false breakout, and this is when the gold was smashed earlier this past week. But when you see a breakout, a decisive breakout above a channel, particularly one that's trending down like this, normally the next move higher is a large one. Okay, it just works that way. A large consolidation period produces a large impulse move higher. So this is a volatile section of the market. Some of these stocks within, gold mining stocks, they'll trade, 4 or 5% per day. If you don't know what you're doing, you can lose your shirt in gold mining stocks. However, if we get a break above this pattern and it starts to stabilize, it can take off. Okay, let's look at silver. Silver is stronger than gold. It, on the big smash down day right here, all it did was come back to this trend line. It's called a back test. This was a more normal sort of, trading, event than the gold event. And now, just this past Friday, it looks like it's playing off of an astro key date that we had on the 11th, I think. Let me look at my chart. Yeah, it was the 11th. And we're starting to bounce. We could very well early in this next week breach this 50-day moving average, which is bumping up against right now. we want to watch November 18th. Okay, watch November 18th if you're trading silver, because it's a high volatility day. When you get into December, we have, I don't think I marked it here, look at December 5th and then December 11th and 12th, okay? Again, you can go to my website, but we do have supportive astrology in silver. Then play the technicals based upon that. Okay, now we're into Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin has been definitely having an up leg, and we had a nice little short consolidation period. You could call it a pennant in technical analysis, the pattern. It broke out of that. There aren't a lot of clear-cut resistance zones up here until you get to the old high, which was 19,000 something. However, we are getting a little bit overdue for a pullback when you look at the RSI down here. So what's happening in Bitcoin? Well, this is something we do need to pay attention to, because Bitcoin has some really strong astrology taking place in November 21st and then November 27th, okay? After that, things sort of cool out a little bit astrologically for Bitcoin. So you want to play the technicals. You want to ask yourself what kind of trader I am. Do I need to take some money off the table, convert some of my Bitcoin to a stable coin, or you can even, there's places you can move it into gold. Or am I just going to, recognize that this is in a very bullish rally, and that even if it consolidates, we might get a consolidation period similar to this over here, where there's maybe 1,000-point range. Here it was look, at this point in the RSI, it was way overbought. And, we traded sideways and worked off that overbought condition. We are in a very similar point right now. I'm not really sure how much more upside, particularly after November 27th. We may go through a dry spell. I expect the consolidation probably to happen in December. Here's Ethereum. Ethereum has a defined resistance point, which it's at right now. In fact, this past Monday, the key date, the astrology was forecasting that this is a likely date for a reversal right now. So from the technical analysis standpoint, it could trade back to this trend line. That would be called a back test and then bounce up. We are not overbought, seriously in Ethereum, so it may just trade sideways for a while. And in the Ethereum chart, let me take a look. The Ethereum chart actually has a little bit stronger astrology than Bitcoin, particularly when you get out to like November 26th, where my cursor is right there, and then more volatility may kick in. So I see Ethereum kind of being potentially more buoyant than Bitcoin. Okay, very important chart, U.S. dollar. We're in a downtrend. We've been trading sideways. We've hit kind of a red zone, which is sort of a warning zone in a way, astrologically, where I knew that there was going to be a lot of volatility. And when we hit that first area, we were potentially breaking out again. And then within a few days, the dollar, broke down below several support levels. And it really looks like if we get a couple more down days right now, the dollar's going lower. That will be bullish for gold. It will be bullish for commodities. Eventually, when you see a breakdown of the dollar, you see prices in stores going up. It tends to increase inflation. So watch the dollar very closely. I do see it not, crashing. I'm turning my pages to look at my notes here. But when I look back over the last, number of months, the dollar has had bullish energies, astrology energies. This was one right here, and I think this was one back here, but it wasn't responding to them in a strong way, which always tells me that this market is much weaker than I had thought. Well, these two dates out here, the November 27th, 29th, 30th, like that, generally they're pretty bullish normally with most markets as well. You can't bank on them, because I think this market is eventually it's going to break down below this pattern and go much further down. So that's it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. I've been researching financial astrology for 25 years. I have a master's in psychology. If you want to ask me a question, there's my email, there's my website, astroindicator.com. This is my psychology website. And if you feel very generous, you could send me a little Bitcoin by using your Bitcoin wallet and scanning this CR code. So thank you for listening. That's it for now. I don't often do these videos, at least on an irregular basis, maybe once a month. So consider subscribing if you'd like to get an update. I know the next time around we'll probably know who our next president's going to be, and we can focus on that. And maybe something a little bit more positive will have come up by that time, and we can include that in the next video. So thank you. Take care of yourself, and consider subscribing. Bye for now.